The dining establishment vibrated with life. Chuckles, glasses clinking in toast, and subtle music created an atmosphere of celebration. Delicate lights suspended from above cast soft illumination across the extended table where I sat with colleagues. This evening was meant to be momentous, my moment. For 5 years, I had dedicated myself entirely to this organization, frequently working overtime, resolved issues others avoided, and guided junior staff. My supervisor, Richard, had hinted repeatedly for months that I would be next for the senior management role, and tonight, my advancement would be declared. I smoothed my dark blue attire and observed those around the table. At the table's head, Richard stood, tapping the wine glass with cutlery to get everyone's attention. Conversation died down as my heartbeat accelerated with expectation. "This evening," he began, his resonant voice carrying through the room, "I want to acknowledge someone truly remarkable, someone who has demonstrated incredible commitment, motivation, and aptitude in just a brief period with our organization. It's unusual to find an individual who can create such an impact in merely 3 months." My expression faltered. 3 months? Richard turned toward my colleague. "Lisa," he continued, "you've surpassed all our hopes. Your guidance, innovation, and approach to challenges have impressed us all, which is why I'm delighted to officially announce your elevation to senior manager. Congratulations." The room erupted with applause while I remained motionless, fingers tightened around my champagne stem, forcing a pleasant expression onto my face. I joined in the applause as Lisa rose, blushing and accepting her new position. This couldn't be happening. Richard turned in my direction as if he just remembered my presence. He grinned, and of course, "Kathy, you've been such a valuable member of the team," he said. "We appreciate everything you do." That was all? A meaningless acknowledgement after 5 years of dedication? I suppressed my emotion and smiled wider. "Of course, Lisa absolutely deserves it," I said, raising my glass. Richard nodded approvingly. "She does a lot more than you already, Kathy. You should take notes." Laughter followed. Lisa uncomfortably muttered, "Oh, I wouldn't say that," but the damage was done. The words hung in the air like a public insult. Throughout the evening, I smiled, conversed, celebrated, but internally, I was seething. When the gathering finally concluded and I stepped outside, I took out my phone. My hands trembled slightly as I composed a brief email to HR. Subject, resignation letter submission. Dear Richard, please find my official resignation letter attached. Effective immediately. Best, Kathy. I paused only briefly before sending it. As soon as the message departed, I inhaled deeply. For the first time in years, I experienced something unexpected. Liberation. But I wasn't finished yet. The workplace felt transformed that Monday. I entered through the main entrance with quiet contentment, my resignation letter already waiting in Richard's inbox. He had no idea what was about to unfold. I deliberately settled in, calmly placing my bag beside my desk and starting my computer. I anticipated Richard would approach me, and right on cue, his office door swung open. "Kathy, my office, now!" The entire floor fell silent. Colleagues exchanged nervous glances. No one had ever heard Richard sound like that before. Urgent, confused, desperate. I rose slowly, walked into his office. Richard sat at his desk, my resignation letter printed before him. He looked up, scanning my face as if trying to determine whether this was a prank. "You're leaving?" His voice was incredulous. "Yes." I sat across from him, folding my hands in my lap, effective immediately. "But why? This is so sudden. We didn't discuss this." I released a soft laugh. "We didn't discuss Lisa's promotion either, but here we are." His jaw tightened. "Kathy, that wasn't personal. She just outperformed you." "She's been here for 3 months," I said, tilting my head. "But sure, if that's what you believe." Richard leaned forward. "You know I appreciate you, right? You've been such an important part of this company for 5 years. I don't want to lose you." I observed him for a long moment, taking in the audacity of his words. "You don't want to lose me," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "But you had no problem overlooking me for a promotion I worked years for. You had no problem laughing when I was humiliated at my own celebration party. And you had no problem telling me to take notes from someone who had just got here." His expression shifted, his usual smug confidence beginning to crack. "Look," he said, running a hand through his hair, "maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I should have handled it differently. But you're resigning out of nowhere. This isn't the right move, Kathy." I smiled, but without warmth. "I sent that email Friday night, Richard. If this was just emotion, I would have stormed out that same evening. But I didn't. I planned this, and I'm leaving on my terms." His hand curled into a fist on the desk. "So what's your plan?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Go to one of our competitors?" I laughed again. "Oh, I don't need to go to a competitor," I said, standing. "You see, Richard, while you were busy ignoring my contributions, someone else wasn't." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "Do you remember Andrew Carter, the CFO you let go last year?" Richard tensed. Of course he remembered. Andrew had been one of the company's most valuable executives, but he and Richard had clashed. Richard had forced him out, thinking he was replaceable. "Andrew reached out to me a few months ago," I continued. "He's starting his own firm and wanted me to lead the operations department, a director-level position. I turned him down at first. I was loyal to this company." I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. "But Friday night changed everything. I called him right after I left the party, and he made the offer again. I accepted." Silence. Pure, unfiltered shock. Richard stared at me like he was trying to process the information. "You're leaving for Andrew's company?" he finally said, voice tight. "I start next Monday," I confirmed. He clenched his jaw. "You won't be able to come back?" I smiled. "I won't need to." I turned, walking to the door. Just before I stepped out, I paused. "You know, Richard," I said over my shoulder, "it's funny how you only realize someone's worth when they walk away." When I emerged from Richard's office, I could feel all eyes on me. The open workspace had gone eerily quiet. My coworkers weren't even pretending to work anymore. Heads peeked over cubicle walls, eyes darting away the second I met their gaze. I returned to my desk with serene calmness, opening my email and forwarding my resignation letter to the entire leadership team. Subject: official resignation notice. Effective immediately, I am stepping down from my position at the company, and it's been an experience I will not forget. Best, Kathy. Seconds later, the first whisper spread across the floor. Rachel, one of the few people I actually trusted, approached me. "Kathy, is it true?" I nodded, giving her a small smile. "Yeah, it's time for me to move on." "Whew," she exhaled sharply. "Wow, just wow. I mean, I get it, but I didn't think you'd actually leave." "Neither did Richard," I muttered. She half laughed. "Well, he's an idiot. Everyone here knows you deserve that promotion." More colleagues started approaching my desk. Even Lisa had looked up from across the room, her eyes darting between me and Richard's office, as if unsure whether to feel guilty or relieved. 10 minutes later, my inbox alerted me to an urgent meeting request from Richard. Subject: urgent, let's talk meeting request, 15 minutes, location, my office. I took my time walking back to his office. When I entered, Richard looked different now, the arrogance gone. "Kathy," he started, leaning forward, "let's talk about this. You're making a rash decision." I let out a soft laugh. "Richard, I gave 5 years of my life. The only rash decision here was yours." His lips pressed into a tight line. "Look, I admit that I mishandled things with the promotion, but we can fix this. I'll match whatever Andrew is offering you." I tilted my head. "You don't even know what Andrew is offering me." "Doesn't matter," he shot back. "We'll figure something out. I can get you a better salary, more flexibility, maybe even—" I held up my hand, cutting him off. "You don't get it, do you? It was never about the money. It was about respect." His jaw tensed. "I don't want to stay in a company where my work is ignored until I threaten to leave. If I wasn't valuable to you before, why should I believe I suddenly am now?" Richard's nostrils flared slightly. "Kathy, be reasonable. You're walking away from a stable position for what? Some startup that might not even succeed?" I smiled. "That startup is being run by someone who values my contributions, and I'd rather bet on myself than stay in a place that treats me like I'm disposable." I stood up. "Goodbye, Richard." As I carried my box to the elevator, a few coworkers clapped softly, small acknowledgments of my silent victory. Lisa finally gathered the courage to approach me. Kathy, I didn't know." I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't know what?" Her mouth opened, then closed again. She knew. Of course she knew. She might not have orchestrated it, but she had benefited from my loss. It's fine, Lisa, I said, not unkindly. Enjoy the promotion. She flinched, but I was already stepping into the elevator. As the door closed, I exhaled slowly. This wasn't just the end, this was the beginning. The Monday after I departed from Richard's office for the final time, I stood before a sleek glass building, taking in the sight of my new beginning, Carter and Associates. Andrew's company was smaller than my former one, but it pulsed with energy and ambition. As I rode the elevator to the top floor, my reflection looked different, more confident, more alive. The moment I entered my new office, a real office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a door I could actually close, I knew I had made the right choice. During my first leadership meeting, Andrew turned to me smiling. Kathy, I want you to take the lead on our new initiative. We're restructuring operations, and with your experience, you're the best person for it. Just like that, no begging, no proving my worth repeatedly, they already recognized my value. The first indication that things were falling apart at Richard's company came 2 days after my departure. My phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. Kathy, oh my God, Richard is losing it. Ever since you left, everything's a mess. He had to call an emergency meeting because no one knows how to handle half the things you used to do. Turns out Lisa doesn't actually do more than you. She doesn't even know what she's doing. I laughed aloud. Of course, Richard had overestimated Lisa's abilities and underestimated mine. A second message arrived. Oh, and get this, 3 clients already reached out asking for you by name. When they found out you left, they weren't happy. I felt a rush of satisfaction. Richard had spent years taking me for granted, and now he was learning a lesson he should have learned long ago. Some people are not replaceable. That afternoon, my assistant appeared in the doorway. Kathy, you have a call on line 1. It's a company called Dawson & Company. They said they used to work with you and want to discuss moving their account over. I blinked. Dawson & Company was one of the biggest clients at my old company. Put me through, I said, keeping my voice steady despite my pounding heart. A moment later, I heard the familiar voice of Mark Dawson, the CEO. Kathy, he said warmly, I heard you moved to Carter and Associates. Let's talk. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. Of course, Mark, what can I do for you? Within a week, 3 of my former company's biggest clients had contacted me, all expressing the same frustration. Things aren't the same since you left. We don't feel like we're in good hands anymore. And so, one by one, they moved their business to us. I wasn't stealing clients. I didn't need to. They were leaving on their own because they trusted me, not the company I used to work for. And Richard? He was scrambling. Rachel kept providing updates. Lisa is drowning. She's not ready for this role at all. I heard Richard yelling at the leadership team in a closed-door meeting this morning. The board is furious about the client losses. Investors are not happy. Word is they're putting pressure on Richard to fix this fast. I could only imagine the look on his face, the panic, the regret. And the best part? I wasn't even trying to hurt him. I was just thriving elsewhere. That Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed with an email from Richard. Subject, a proposal. Kathy, I'd like to have a conversation. I believe we can come to a mutual beneficial arrangement if you're open to it. Let's set up a meeting next week to discuss options. Looking forward to your response, Richard. I leaned back in my chair, laughing softly. He was desperate, and for the first time in 5 years, I had all the power. I took my time crafting my reply. Subject, regarding, a proposal. Richard, I'm available for a brief meeting Monday at 10 a.m. Let me know if that works for you. Best, Kathy. At precisely 10 a.m., I walked into the familiar glass office building I had left behind weeks ago. As I stepped into Richard's office, I saw him. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, a nervous energy in the way he sat. Thanks for coming in, he said, forcing a tight smile. I sat down, crossing my legs. Of course, what's on your mind? He exhaled and leaned forward. I won't waste your time. We need you back, Kathy. I said nothing, just let the words hang in the air. He continued. I underestimated your role here. I'll admit that, but we can make this right. If you return, I'm prepared to offer you a substantial raise, a senior executive title, and full decision-making authority over your department. I tilted my head. So let me get this straight. You had 5 years to recognize my value, 5 years to promote me, 5 years to respect my work, but instead, you passed me over for someone with 3 months of experience and told me to take notes on how to do better. And now, after losing key clients and watching your company spiral, suddenly you're offering me everything I deserved all along? Richard's jaw tightened. Kathy, come on. I held up a hand, stopping him. Let me ask you something. If I never left, would I be sitting in this chair right now? Would you have given me this offer out of appreciation? Or are you only doing it now because you're losing control? His silence said everything. I let out a small, amused laugh. That's what I thought. Richard's desperation broke through. Kathy, be smart about this. You have history here, a future. Do you really want to throw away all the hard work you've put into this company? I smiled. Richard, you still don't get it, do you? I stood up and leaned slightly forward. I never needed you. You needed me, and now you're finally realizing that. I turned, walking to the door, but paused just before stepping out. You should take notes, Richard, I said softly, echoing his own words back at him. Maybe next time you'll learn to value the people who actually make your company run. Then I walked out, and this time, I never looked back. Back at Carter & Associates, things were thriving. Our client roster had nearly doubled. And then, on a quiet Friday afternoon, Rachel sent me one final update that made me laugh out loud. Richard just got fired. The board forced him out. They couldn't recover from all the client losses. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee. Perfect. Richard had thought I was replaceable. Turns out, he was. And me? I was exactly where I was meant to be.
The words hung in the air between us, suspended like dust motes in the shaft of afternoon sunlight cutting through Helen's corner office window. Rachel has more of a team spirit. You're too focused on results. My spreadsheet, the one showing how I'd single-handedly increased our client retention by 47%, glowed on the tablet between us. The promotion I'd worked 6 years for, sacrificed weekends and holidays for, had just been handed to Rachel. Rachel, who spent more time crafting Instagram captions than client proposals. A muscle in my jaw twitched as I maintained eye contact with Helen, her mid-50s face arranged in what she probably thought was sympathetic professionalism. The Chicago skyline behind her blurred as something hot and electric surged through my chest. I understand, I said, my voice unnaturally steady while my fingernails carved half-moons into my palm beneath the desk. More of a team player. Helen nodded, relief washing over her face as she leaned back in her ergonomic chair. Camille, you're brilliant, but Rachel, she's got charm. People like being around her. She's just easier. Easier, not more capable, not more accomplished, just easier. My name is Naomi, I'm 41 and a corporate strategist. This is the story of how I transformed professional betrayal into the greatest redirection of my career. I joined Westlake Strategies at 35, leaving behind a teaching position to plunge into corporate life with everything I had. 6 years of midnight reports, last-minute presentations, and salvaging client accounts no one else could touch. I doubled our Midwest portfolio, redesigned our training system from scratch, and saved the company nearly $2 million in operational waste. But Rachel, with her lunch selfies and carefully curated girl boss quotes taped to her monitor, was getting the promotion I'd earned through measurable results. I watched Helen pretend to shuffle papers, waiting for me to thank her, to be gracious in defeat, to shrink. Instead, I reached into my leather portfolio and slid a crisp white envelope across her glass desk. I appreciate the feedback, I said, with a calm smile I didn't feel. Here's my resignation, effective 2 weeks from today. Helen's composure cracked. Her perfectly lined eyes widened. Naomi, wait, let's talk this through. No need, I said, rising from my chair. You were clear, and I am focused on outcomes. That's why I'm leaving. What Helen didn't know, what no one at Westlake had noticed, is that while Rachel was busy pleasing, I'd been building. My own leadership development firm, fully registered, quietly growing and profitable since the second quarter. I hadn't lost today. I'd simply outgrown the room. As I stepped out of Helen's office, I felt the shift ripple through the river north floor of Westlake Strategies. Heads turned, conversations quieted. Through the glass walls, I could see Helen staring at my resignation letter, her manicured hand pressed against her mouth. Rachel was already at her desk, texting rapidly, no doubt imagining where she'd hang her inspirational wall art above my soon-to-be empty cubicle. But I moved with calm purpose, returning to my workspace like it was just another Monday, because tucked inside that resignation envelope was a second document, one that would make Helen choke on her artisan latte tomorrow morning. The following 2 weeks were theater. Rachel swanned through the bullpen with her ever-present iced vanilla latte and a spotlight following her in her mind. On the 4th day, she leaned over my cubicle wall, lips curled in a smug half-smile. "Nam," she said, using the nickname she knew I hated. "I hope you're not too disappointed. I know you really wanted that spot." I met her gaze briefly while quietly backing up 3 years' worth of metrics, training manuals, and workflow optimizations. Not to take, but to document every dollar saved, every system I designed, every outcome attributed to my team. "No hard feelings at all, Rachel," I said, smiling coolly. "You'll shine." She left satisfied, but she didn't know what those results were built on. 3 years ago, in frustration with outdated processes, I'd started developing my own adaptive team performance software. Not on company time, not with their tools. And last week, the patent was approved. That second page of my resignation detailed its impact. Millions in revenue and retention tied directly to my intellectual property, IP that would leave with me. 1 week later, I received an email from Jack Lewis, CEO of Architect Solutions, our top competitor. Over coffee at a quiet corner table at Intelligentsia, he offered me more than a role. He offered equity, autonomy, a future. He slid a contract across the polished wooden table. "We've been waiting for someone like you, Naomi," Jack said, his tone steady, sincere. "Someone who understands that outcomes, not optics, build legacies." As I signed the partnership agreement, something shifted inside me. This was what real recognition felt like. Not applause for appearances, but respect for substance. On my final day at Westlake Strategies, just as I returned my access badge to security, Helen called me into her glass-walled office one last time. The polished calm she always wore had cracked. Her voice trembled. "Naomi, we need to discuss the report you attached to your resignation." She held up the printed document with stiff fingers. "Why didn't you ever tell us about this platform you built?" I sat down across from her slowly, straightening the hem of my navy blazer. "I did," I replied, maintaining eye contact. 3 separate proposals over the last 2 years. You dismissed each one. Said your priority was improving interpersonal chemistry across departments." Her eyes scanned the pages, color draining from her face as she absorbed the data. Operational savings, automated workflows, predictive project forecasting. "And this is patented?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. "Filed last fall. Fully approved." I paused, letting the words sink in. "And I've accepted an equity partnership at Architect Solutions. They're already preparing to scale it firm-wide." Helen exhaled sharply. "Architect? Naomi, no, you can't. That's our primary competitor in the Midwest." Her voice cracked. "What about loyalty?" I tilted my head slightly. Loyalty? The word tasted bitter. "You mean when you rewarded Rachel's charm over my contributions? Or when you sidelined my proposals because I didn't host enough happy hours?" She opened her mouth, but I didn't wait. "If you'd valued output instead of office politics, we wouldn't be here." I rose to leave. "We'll match their offer," Helen blurted, desperation edging into her voice. "Senior Vice President, just stay." I paused at the door. It was never about the title, Helen. It was about being valued. As I left, I heard the frantic dialing behind me, but the damage was already done. The patent was mine, the ink on the partnership agreement dry. And as for Rachel, she was about to learn the hard way that charisma can open doors, but only substance keeps them from slamming shut. That evening, as I packed up the last of my things, I spotted a sticky note left on my monitor. "Sad to see you go. Stay in touch, Rachel." I smirked, crumpled it, and tossed it into the bin. She'd hear my name again soon enough. In fact, the whole industry would. My first day at Architect Solutions felt like I'd stepped into a different universe. Gone were the beige walls and passive-aggressive Slack threads. My new office overlooked Lake Michigan, floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek design, and a nameplate on the door that read, Naomi Bennett Partner, Strategy and Systems Innovation. But the real shift wasn't the title. It was the respect. Jack Lewis, the CEO, held a full all-hands meeting to welcome me. But it wasn't a typical onboarding speech. He told my story. He spoke about the platform I developed, its measurable impact, and how it had already changed how firms operate. Naomi isn't here to fill a role, Jack said, his voice carrying across the attentive room. She's here to lead a new frontier. Her work has saved millions. It's brilliant, it's proven, and it's just the beginning. At Westlake, I was a ghost behind the curtain. At Architect, I was the architect in the spotlight. And then, 3 months later, came the moment that sealed it. Mid-strategy workshop, my phone buzzed. A message from Tyler Henderson, one of the few sharp minds left at Westlake. Check the news, something big just dropped. I slipped into my office and pulled up the headline. Westlake Strategies loses 30% of clients after Q2 systems breakdown. The article was brutal. Missed deadlines, ballooning budgets, 3 flagship clients gone. The report described Westlake's internal systems as fractured, outdated, and alarmingly dependent on undocumented processes. But one quote hit home from a former client of mine. Service has collapsed, said Thomas Kwan, CEO of Terra Nova Solutions. We once trusted Westlake with enterprise-level integrations. Now they can't even deliver on basic timelines. It's like the backbone of their operations disappeared. I smiled tightly. Ted was right. I was that backbone. The system they'd undervalued, dismissed, and handed off to someone with zero understanding of how to sustain it. A second buzz, this time from Tyler. Rachel's having a full-blown meltdown in the break room. I leaned back, sunlight reflecting off the lake and spilling into my office. I didn't need revenge. I had results. Rachel had spent years mimicking competence, repeating buzzwords, smiling her way into rooms she didn't deserve to be in. But now she was exposed, and Helen, who gambled on appearance over ability, was watching her decision unravel in real time. Meanwhile, I had bigger moves in motion. At Architect, my system wasn't just running, it was revolutionizing. Project timelines were cut by 52%. Client satisfaction scores hit an all-time high. Operational KP is off the charts. Jack had already approved full-scale rollout across divisions, and 3 Fortune 100 companies were in negotiation to license my platform. They underestimated me. Now they were trying to catch up. One crisp Thursday morning, 6 months after I left Westlake Strategies, I walked into my architect office to find Jack Lewis standing by my desk, holding a folded copy of the Chicago Business Ledger. "Have you seen this?" he asked, raising the paper. The front page headline read, Westlake Strategies announces emergency restructure amid mass departures and system collapse. I took the paper and nodded. I saw. Looks like they're dismantling everything. They're finally admitting how badly they mishandled their people, Jack said. They tried to rebuild your platform in-house, but they didn't understand the foundation. I said, already knowing they thought it was just code, but it was the logic behind the code that made it scalable. Jack gave me a slow, knowing smile, the kind that only comes from watching the long game unfold. Which is why the board voted unanimously to promote you, he said. Starting next week, you'll be our Executive Vice President of Strategic Innovation. You've not just improved our systems, you've changed our direction. A quiet warmth rose in my chest. This was what recognition should feel like. Not applause for being agreeable, but respect for building something real. Later that afternoon, as Chicago's skyline glowed gold in the sunset, an unexpected email landed in my inbox. From Helen McBride. Subject, apology. I assume you've heard what's happening at Westlake. I want you to know I was wrong. Dismissing your work was the worst mistake of my career. The board knows now. They know what you built and what we lost. I resigned last week. Rachel stepped down a month ago. Turns out deliverables don't respond to charm. I stared at the screen, mixed emotion flickering across my face. Validation had arrived. Not that I needed it, but it was poetic all the same. The email from Helen continued. I know it's too late to change what happened, but I wanted you to know you were right. Results do matter. I just wish I'd seen that sooner. Best, Helen. I read it twice. There was a time when a message like that might have broken something loose inside me, when even late recognition might have been enough to patch old wounds. But that time was gone. Now, in my corner office at Architect Solutions, sunlight glinted off the glass frame surrounding my patent certificate. Behind me, a polished plaque from our highest-performing quarter to date. On the shelf, a fresh copy of Forbes, open to a feature naming me one of the top 10 women redefining tech innovation. Helen's message was no longer a reckoning. It was a footnote. I clicked reply and typed, "Thank you for your message. You're right. Results do matter. I wish you well in what comes next." I hit send, then looked around my office. Every inch of it, every ounce of respect in this space had been earned, not gifted, not bartered for, built. The next morning, I called a full team meeting. The room filled quickly, engineers, analysts, designers. Not one person was there to show face. They were here because they cared. Once we settled, I stood. Before we dig into our next major rollout, I said, I want to share a quick story, not about strategy or code, but about value, about recognizing it in others, and about never letting anyone else define your worth. Heads nodded, eyes sharpened. Now we were building something bigger together. As I spoke, I saw people leaning in, not just to my words, but to the weight behind them. They understood. They saw that this company, our company, wasn't running on image or ego. It was running on integrity, on courage, on the belief that quiet strength, when aligned with purpose, builds movements. That evening, driving home past Westlake Strategies, I slowed at the light. Their once proud logo etched into the side of the building looked weathered now, dimmed by time and consequence. A for lease sign blinked weakly in the fourth-floor window, downsizing again. But I didn't feel smug. I felt grateful. Grateful they didn't see me. Grateful they dismissed what I created. Grateful because in pushing me out, they set me free to build something better. Because sometimes the greatest gifts come dressed as rejection. Sometimes being too focused on results is the very quality that makes you unstoppable. And sometimes the best way to respond to being underestimated is to build something so impactful they can't look away. My phone buzzed. A message from Tyler lit up the screen. Westlake's board is asking about you. They're wondering if you'd consider coming back as CEO. Tyler, who'd maintained our friendship and had recently been promoted to operations director with direct board contact, always kept me updated on Westlake's internal developments. I stared at the screen, then typed back slowly. Appreciate it, Tyler, but I'm exactly where I need to be. Because real success isn't about going back to prove anyone wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's about standing firm in your own value, especially when no one else does. It's about refusing to shrink for someone else's comfort and choosing to rise for your own purpose. And that's where the story really begins. As I pulled into the garage of my Lincoln Park townhome, I found myself thinking about all the other Naomis out there. Quiet professionals doing exceptional work, constantly passed over because they don't shout the loudest or play the political game. Maybe this story, the one I lived, will reach one of them. Maybe it will be the sign they need to stop waiting for approval and start building without it. Because sometimes rejection isn't a dead end, it's a redirection. You take the dismissal, you take the silence, and you turn it into momentum, into systems, platforms, and legacies that prove your too much was always just code for you're beyond what they could handle. That night, sitting in my home office reviewing global licensing proposals for the system I once built in secret, I felt a deep sense of peace. Above my desk, framed in matte black, was the quote Helen once tossed at me like an insult, "You're too focused on results." She wasn't wrong. That focus, it's exactly what brought me here, to leadership, to innovation, to clarity, to the place I was always meant to stand, on my own terms.